Hello everybody. Today I'm going to do a tutorial on how to get your own custom height map into the Unreal Engine 4. And I found like a really smooth workflow for creating just really detailed, flush, randomized height maps. And I kind of had to search for a while and figure out a good method of how to extracting those height maps and putting them actually into the Unreal Engine 4. So let me give you a breakdown of that workflow. So you're going to need 4 programs. The first one is going to be Terragen 4, and this is basically the terrain generator. It's really a powerful tool, although it's not the most aesthetically beautiful tool. It's not going to give you like amazing graphics inside of the actual program. But once you transfer the height map into Unreal Engine 4, you really start seeing the creative powers of these programs. So if you don't know what Terragen 4 is, there are earlier versions too, which are still relevant. I suggest just get this one. You can buy it. I'm not really too sure what kind of functions that opens up. You don't need to buy it. I'm just using the free version today. And I will put the link below the video so that you can download it. Let me just open it up though. So like I was saying, it's not a very beautiful program. You can see here, this is basically how it renders out. Um, and I don't have the fastest processor too, so you're going to see a little bit delays compared to other people's computers or even yours. Plus I'm running the streaming program, so that kind of has an effect on the speed of everything too. But otherwise, it's a great program. To get started, we really don't even need to do much. There's only a few things that we need to focus on here, so I'm not really going to get into the nuts and berries of the program, but this is basically the only 2 boxes here. This is more for just rendering it out so that you can see it inside this program. We don't need to really worry or focus on that. What the main thing is this terrain panel and the shaders panel, because those 2 combined are what is going to, that's basically going to be the data that is used to generate the height map. So let's open up, you go here, the fractal terrain. So this is basically going to be the meat and potatoes of your world that you're creating. And in this program, you basically have, I think it's like 67,000 kilometer planet, something like that. And it kind of randomly generates based on the parameters that you set. It's going to generate a world, and we're just going to be looking at a small piece of that world that it's actually generating. So right here, this is going to be important for us to kind of visualize what we're actually going to be using and generating. So what I've been using is a 16 kilometer piece, because I feel like that translates, for me, that translates well into the Unreal Engine 4 and what I have been trying to do, which is an open world kind of map. So you can use more smaller maps if you're just doing like a small project for class, or you don't really need a huge area. You can use like one of these 1 kilometer ones, and then we'll go into specifics of how to translate that in terms of the height map later on. But I've been working with the 16 kilometer size area because I feel like that's just kind of the basic standard size of an open world game, like Skyrim and stuff like that. I believe are like about 16 kilometers worth of area. Um, and I feel like that's kind of like the biggest area that translates well into the Unreal Engine 4, but that's up to you and what you really need. And that's it. So we're basically like halfway done um, in terms of just understanding what we're going to need to have everything set up. So what we're using this for is very simple. The other thing, if you want to randomize your world, we have little sliders here, and when you change those sliders, it is going to actually change the layout of the map. So you can mess around with those. I think it was like at 5,000. I'll just put it back. The other thing, and there's all these different panels that are going to tweak this little landscape. We don't really have to worry too much about that though. For this video, you can mess around with that on your own. The biggest important thing is the seed. So basically the seed is going to randomize your terrain. So if I put in 1, it's going to give me this terrain right here. If I put in 2, it's going to give me this terrain right here. And of course, that's all based on your parameters that you're setting up. If I go back to 1, it's going to give me that exact same standard map that it generated earlier. So it's it's fixed that way. So if you go through, you can hit like random seed. So this is 9,652, and it's going to be that map. And I can just like copy and paste that. If I go back to 1, it's going to give me that map again. If I go to 9,652, is going to go back to that exact same map. And as far as I know, this is like unlimited. So there's about an unlimited amount of maps you can make. On top of that, you're going to have all these parameters that you're going to set. They're going to even add to that kind of more originality. So it's kind of cool. It's a very powerful terrain creator. You don't have to control like other programs will allow you to. You're basically going to get a random map, and whatever map you choose, you're kind of stuck with how it looks. And then if you do want to make any modifications, you're going to have to make that in UE4, which, I mean, for me and what I'm doing, that's not a big deal. And especially for this easy of a workflow, like, I'm totally happy with that. So I'm just going to open up a file that I already created. It's for like this idea that I have, so it's just called evolution test, because this is just like a test map. And so I'll open it up. And so this is kind of the terrain that I'm working with. It's seed like 1 million, I think. I just put in something ridiculous, but I like the way that it turned out. So another important thing, which I might have should have showed you before I got into this, is the height map and how we're going to create the height map in it. It's almost too simple. I had to spend at least like 3 hours reading forums to figure this out, and I ended up just kind of going on someone's lead and then figuring it out myself, how to work everything. But you basically just right click anywhere in this workflow area. It'll bring a little drop down menu. You go to create height field operator and you go to generate. So this one is 2. I already kind of have one set up for my project that I had open. And then you just kind of click it into the shaders area. Well, I guess you can kind of put it anywhere. But basically, this is your shader, and this is your terrain data. So this is basically going to compile all of the fractal information and I guess just the other terrain information that this engine uses to generate that terrain. And then it computes it. Then you have like a compute node which puts all of this data together, and then it goes into the base shader. This is just the standard one that comes with. It's called base colors. It's a black and white shader, and that basically interacts with all of the rendering inputs. But for our height map, you're basically going to want to take this base shader and just drag a line over to the shader field right here, and that's it. So it's basically saying this information that generates the terrain is going to be input into the shader so that it creates that black and white mesh for it, and then that is going to go into the height field. And that's kind of the workflow. You can actually delete all of that. You don't really need it, but that kind of makes it harder to see. If you delete this information, you won't be able to see any of this up here. It's going to go turn all black or all white. and that's it. So we're done. We are done creating our height map. So the only other next step is to bring up that menu. So you go and you right click on it, on the height map generation node. You go into the settings and you change these parameters. So that this one, the number of points, I'll just go one by one. So number of points is going to be the height map resolution. So let's say if you had a Photoshop picture, it's going to be 8,000 pixels by 8,000 pixels. At least for me, it normally starts off at 1,000. So this is basically, if you wanted 1080p height map, you would do 1920 by 1080. In this case, height maps for UE4 are in squares, so we need a 8,000 by 8,000, or I would say if you're doing a smaller map, this is me. This is basically me expanding out to the largest file size that UE4. I've come to test that UE4 doesn't really work well with anything over 8,000. That's just the largest texture size that UE4 is going to work with or going to output. So it's really no point in going over 8,000 by 8,000. And if you're working with a large map and you want to retain all of the detail from this, you're going to want to go as big as possible. It is going to make the rendering time take forever, but it'll be worth it in the end. I don't suggest going lower than 2,000 by 2,000. And that's just mostly to retain detail. I would say no matter how big of a map you're working with, don't go under 2,000 by 2,000, just so that your terrain actually looks good. And then of course here, this is the size in meters. So like I said, the area that I'm working with is 16 kilometers. So this is in meters. If it's going to be 1,000 meters equals 1 kilometer, so I need to put in 16,000 meters. This scale starts off at 2,000. This is going to be the feature scale. So this is like if there is like a mountain or something like that, what scale compared to the whole map is that going to be? I like to go with something smaller, and I've tested this out. I say experiment with any of these fractals right here. Just experiment with them and just see the results. This is going to start out at 0.25. I like bringing it under 0.2. This is basically going to set the highs and lows and the difference between the highs and lows. The higher you go, the more ugly this height map is going to translate into terrain in the Unreal Engine 4. And that's just me based on my experience. So I like to bring it under 0.2, and that seems to create more realistic height differences. And the roughness, I haven't really messed around with that, so I didn't mess around with it in this one. This seed part though right here is going to be the most important thing when generating your map. So because it's going to be this seed number here. So if you have something different in here, you're not going to get what you see in this picture. It's going to give you, like I said, like when I put in 1 over here and it gave me that map, if I put in 1 over here, it's going to give me that original map with that, seed of 1. So I put in 1 million, and then after that point you hit generate now. I've already done that step. It's going to take a while. It'll load up, but that's going to be a very, very important step, because if you don't hit generate now, you're not going to actually be able to save the file correctly, and it's not going to be anything. It's going to be like a white blank screen. So you need to hit generate now. And then once that's done, you hit close, and then you right click back again on the height field generator node, and then you hit, what do you hit? Save file as. So it's generated the height map file, and then on this one, so it's going to be a .ter file, which is Terragen 4's exclusive file saving system. On this one, I saved it as evolution heightmap.ter. So that's already been saved. That usually just takes like 2 seconds. It doesn't, because you have already generated it. You already spent the time rendering it out for the height map, and then you just hit save. And then at this point, you are completely done with the program. And I would actually say just exit it out. I don't want to save any changes that I made to that project. So now the next step is this program right here, and I will link a download website for this program, and this is just a conversion. This is a file conversion program. So what you need to do with this is basically going to change the Terragen 4 file, the .tar file, into a TIFF file. And the TIFF file is something that Photoshop can open up and change into a different file type, like a PGN. I think UE4 only uses PGNs, and it uses raw files for height map data. So we'll go to load terrain, and we'll go to evolution hm.tar, and we're going to open that up. And this might take a little bit while longer than normal, but here you go. It's slowly going to load up that file. And this is the part that is going to take a while, generating all the maps and exporting them out it's gonna take a long time. I usually find that generating the height map takes the longest, and then this part kind of takes the second longest. It's about the same. And then from there, while it's loading it up, just so you can see how it looks like in this program, it shouldn't take too much longer. Like I said, I'm running an AMD 8150. I know, like I just haven't, I upgraded to a 1066 gigabyte graphics card, but I still need to upgrade my processor. Working with programs like this, they're going to be very processor intensive. It's not really going to be more on the graphics side like the Unreal Engine. Okay, so once this is done, I'll just come back and we'll go over, the next steps. Okay, so I'm back, guys. It just barely finished loading up. It took a little bit longer than the first time earlier today whenever I first generated that map. But it's okay. It might take some time. It's a large file. I mean, it's like an 8K file. So the next step from here, so this is what the height map looks like. This is what we created. So this is a legitimate height map with all the data that is going to be creating your terrain. The black part is going to be the lowest points, kind of like seafloor level, and then the white parts are going to be kind of like the mountainous areas. So the whiter it is, the higher, the blacker it is, the lower. So once we have this, it's pretty easy. You just go to export. You have your choice of doing a 16-bit or a 32-bit. If you are just wanting to play around with it, go ahead and do the 16-bit one. You can do a PGM or a TIFF. I just say go a TIFF because that's going to retain the most data, and I would also do 32-bit because we're going to be going from a 32-bit to a 16-bit because the Unreal Engine 4 can only read 16-bit files, but it's also going to help us retain as much data as we can, and it's going to look a lot smoother and better inside the engine. So you'll click a 32-bit floating point, you'll hit OK, and then you would put in like what you want to call the file. I already have it here. We're going to be saving as a TIFF, and this is what it's actually going to be looking like. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about what the file looks like in the picture, because I will show you how, like, kind of why that is and how to fix that. And then you'll just hit save. I've already saved it, and that too is going to take a while. My program actually kind of crashes for like 5 minutes, and then out of nowhere it just says, oh, it's done, and then I have like the height map for it. So I'm not going to do that part for you because it's already done. So once you're done exporting that to the file, you won't get any warning messages. It'll just be done, and you'll be able to use your program again. It'll give you a little loading bar down here, just like before, and then that will be done. It'll just go back to a page like this, and then you just click out of it, and then we're going to load up that height map into Adobe Photoshop, and we'll go to Open, and we'll go to the evolution height map, and this is the TIFF file. So you go to Open, and what this is going to do is with this particular map, I haven't exported it out yet, so we'll go step by step in how we do this. And I had to figure this out by myself. It took me like this step two, I did it a few times. It took me a few hours to figure out, which is why I'm making this tutorial, because the workflow doesn't really exist. I couldn't find any workflow for it. So you go to Image, go to Mode, and it's going to give you this drop down. So remember what I said, we want a 16-bit because the Unreal Engine 4 doesn't work with files that are above 16 bits. So we go to 16-bit channel, and this is what's really going to start making our picture come to life. So go to radius, we can leave that alone. And so if you mess around with these sliders, we're going to want to try to keep this as black as we can get it. But we want a lot of detail coming out, because that's really what's going to, determine the terrain. So you can just mess with these sliders. I like amping up the detail on it because that makes everything pop out. You can mess with the shadows. You don't really necessarily need everything to look super good right away. And if you don't want it to be that high, you can turn down the highlights, which is what I'm going to do on it. And just kind of mess around with these sliders more until you get it. I mean, you can kind of, once you start messing around with it, you can kind of get an idea of, what the end result is going to look like based on, what you're doing. And there's still other options, so don't worry about too much how it's looking right now. And then you just hit OK, and it will convert it to a HDR image. It's a high def resolution image, and what that's going to allow you to do is start saving it as a PNG or a RAW file that the Unreal Engine can work with. We're not done yet because there are some things we need to do. So we're basically adjusting it to where this little gray mark right here is going to match into that black. So we go to brightness and contrast. That's going to mess with the brightness, and this will mess with the contrast here. And I like bringing up the contrast a little bit to get more definition. And then we'll go to adjustments, we'll go to levels. This is the important part because you see this little spike right here. So you want to bring that slider past that. I usually like bringing this up and then you don't want the brightest part to be nothing, so you want to bring that over. I don't really fully understand all of that stuff. These levels, I've taken a lot of photography, so a certain extent I get it, but it's also kind of like, I don't know, these slider scales I don't really get. I just know to use them, and you're basically kind of bringing the difference between the darks and the lights kind of more together. And like I said, we wanted to get rid of that little gray patch right there, and that's basically making sure that all the levels are adjusted well. And it also brings out more texture to the height map. And that's what we're going for, because that's going to really create all the dips and crevices in our terrain. And then you just hit OK, and then from there, we're basically done, and we can go in. You can always mess around if you want more. You can work with the curves. That's more for contrast, and then you can mess around with the exposure. If you want to brighten things up or lower it, and like I was saying, brightening it up is going to increase the height of it. Lowering it down is going to decrease it, and I actually kind of want to decrease it a little bit because I want things to be a little bit more flatter in certain areas. So we went ahead and did that. So this is basically what I like to see in a height map, because I know this is going to translate well over to Unreal Engine 4. And this black stuff is basically going to be water. For me, that's what I'm going to use it for. This is basically going to be ocean area. And so we're good to go on that. And let's go ahead, File, Save As. And we're going to make it, for me, I just like using PNG. And I'm going to save over this one because I had made one previously. I didn't really like the water to ground area ratio. So we're going to save over that. Go yes. Okay. And it's saving it. And it is now basically a 16-bit PNG file, 8,000 by 8,000 pixel. This is now a file that the Unreal Engine 4 can use for a height map. So we're basically already almost done. I'm just letting this save. It's almost done, as you can tell right here. And I might not keep this for my project, but this is still gonna look like a really cool area, and hopefully the one I made before was a 34 kilometer or a 32 kilometer map area size. So I think that one, it just had, I don't know, I just felt like it had too much information. Height information was like too large of an area squished into too small of a space. So I'm hoping that the 16 kilometer and the 8 by 8K resolution will look really good inside the engine. So we're basically done with that. And that's saved out. And so we can close Photoshop, you can close all your other programs, and it really just comes down to the Unreal Engine 4. I created a map already, so I'll open it up. It's just a standard third-person map. I haven't made any changes to it yet. So we're just going to open it up. We're not going to start on the base level. We're actually just going to create a new level, and that basically clears out any previous information that's in that standard playing level. And it allows us to implement the height map without any problems. So we don't want to work on this level. So we go to File, New Level, and we're going to go to Default, because this at least gives us a player start. So if we hit play, we have our little player there, and so that's what we're going to use to like test it out, make sure everything works. So we'll go here to the landscape, and you go to, say, Create New or Import. So you go to Import File. You click on the, area where you get a file from, and we have it saved under Evolution Mon. That was my idea for a game. Don't judge me. And this is that height map that we created. And you go to Open, and it'll load it in. And so this is the height map resolution is 8 by 8,000, so 8K texture size. On this, you want it to give the location on the Z100, so that's fine. And this is the scale. You want to make sure everything is scaled to 100. That's kind of the base value. And so right here, so this is where you want these to match. So it says height map resolution 8 by 8. If the overall resolution is over this resolution, you're gonna get stretching on the sides of your map, and it's going to look ugly. So we want to make sure that we're just going to change that to 31 by 31, the number of components, and that gives us an overall resolution of 7,906 by 7,906, and that will kind of crop the edges of our map off just like a little bit, but it's gonna fit. And you can mess around with those settings and see for yourself. You can just sit there and make it and then delete it and then make it again. But before we do that, what we're gonna need to do before, I should have done this before, is you actually need to select a material. If you're starting from scratch, you can go in and go to starter content, get like materials like one of these, and put it in there. I particularly am just going to go to just right click in this area, and I'm going to go to create a new material. And I'll just put this as, and this is, you're making this because whenever you have your own landscape and you're starting from scratch, you're going to want to start the landscape from scratch because you want to build it so you can make your own painting layers and use your own textures, stuff like that. And that's going to be for later on tutorials. But for now, we'll just call this, let's see, I usually just see people use this language, so I'll just go material underscore landscape evolution mon. And so we have that now, and I'm going to load it up. And for now, so this is what our material looks like for now. I'm just going to do something simple. I'll just go to starter content textures, and I'm just going to get like a grass texture. No, I don't really want to work with the grass texture. What I've been using is this gold texture because I feel like you can see all the contours better with it. And you just click, so move the texture sample to the base color, and that's what your material is going to look like now. Yeah, apply and save the changes. All right, so now we have that material. This is our new material. Go to save all, and then you just drop it in there and import. Nothing too fancy, just something to get started. And it's going to take a time because it is a large height map file, and this is basically is about as big of a map as Unreal Engine 4 will make you or let you make. If you wanted to max it out, I think it is that like 81,000 by 81,000, so you can actually create your height map resolution with those numbers too, and then you'll be able to fully utilize the max potential the Unreal Engine 4 will let you use. I think there might be a way around it if you're using C++ or like some other kind of plugin. You might be able to create bigger maps because I have seen people make bigger maps than that. I just don't know how. That's something I might have to look into and make a tutorial on in the future. So this is our map now, though. Look at that. So it's pretty cool. You can fly around. Let me get the camera, speed it up a bit, and so we can kind of fly. Let me max that out. There you go. And then zoom out. So this is our map now. Look at that. And so it's really cool. So this area would probably be where your ocean is, and of course if you're down on the ground, this is probably what it's going to look like for your character. See, and this is the problem. This is what I'm still working on figuring out, is to have not make sure everything's not like super going up like that. And of course we have the problems of it cutting off right there, and but it just has like tons of detail, and you can always come in with your brush. Like if you need like a plains area, you can come in, you can get your, smoothing tool and just kind of smooth out an area. If you're doing an area for like a plains, you don't want it, it's going to be like a muddy area with grass on it. You can do that, and that will make it just like nicer for certain areas. And then you can keep it all, ridgy around mountainous areas. I still got to mess around with it more and figure out like, exactly all the parameters I don't want to use to really get a good looking map. But as far as I'm concerned, I mean, it makes for some really cool scenes. And then you can come over here to your little island. Let's see. And let's get the select tool. We'll select this little guy. This is like the player start kind of thing. Not too sure where we want to place him, but we can at least get him over to some land. I'll just place him in this little ridge and see how that looks. And just press play, and then there you go. So I'm like in this little crevice now, and of course you're going to want to build your terrain, or else it's not going to really look that good. So you want to build all the lighting, and then it won't kind of have all this like pixelated look, and you want to make your own textures and stuff. But like this right here would be really cool. Like even if you just put like a river through here, or you have your guy just kind of walking through this kind of canyon. That's pretty sweet. And you can always go in with your tools and really make really unique areas. But you have this large map that's so ridiculously large. I mean, I walk like nowhere. I mean, it's huge, and it's fluid. And there you go. So that is how to easily go from scratch to generating your own height map, and then putting that height map into Unreal Engine 4 and having it as a playable level. And then you would just go to File. You can just go Save Current, which is going to save this level, and then you can just put like I don't know, level 1, just to be stupid, and it'll save this map. Takes a while because like I was saying, even though I'm saving it to a solid state drive, I have an old processor, and it kind of slows things up a little bit. But hopefully, if you're working on a workstation and you want to try something new, I mean, you have like a newer processor. I know like the new AMD processors are pretty killer. Would be really killer for making games at a budget cost. Probably like half the cost of what you'd be able to make something in the past. I mean, like I'm saying, I'm just using a 1060 6GB, and if I wanted to make a 1080p game, I mean, it's no problem. Like it's super easy to build. So you could probably make like a good UE4 engine computer for like $1,000 now, where you'll just completely destroy and be able to have all the tools at a fast rate, where you can just make things without having to wait and really spend time and focus on finishing and completing your jobs. So there we go. And so that's been saved. So this level, I can always come back to it. I can create other maps, so you can jump around the levels. Well, thank you guys for sticking around for my tutorial, and I'll see you guys in future videos.